Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
50 years ago, the Philippines watched as a powerful leader declared martial law, plunging the country in 2 years of authoritarian rule. Today, history takes another dramatic turn, but this time, the world is watching.
What is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
History has a way of repeating itself, or does it? The Philippines once suffered under a dictatorship that lasted to decades. Now, many ask, is Bongbong Marcos leading the country toward the same fate?
But for a family member like me, that's kidnapping. That's forcibly taking my father to another...
Rodrigo Duterte, once the most feared man in the Philippines, now faces the International Criminal Court for the alleged thousands killed in his war on drugs.
Stop drugs and criminality in 3 to 6 months.
Cleaning up the streets from drug addicts and drug peddlers, as one of his campaign promised during his election campaign, was supported by the majority of Filipino voters that took him into power on 2016. His arrest has ignited a firestorm across the country and beyond, sparking nationwide protests and sending shockwaves across the world.
We won't lose hope because we believe that his arrest was illegal.
But this isn't just about Duterte. It's about power, loyalty, and betrayal at the highest levels of government.
There are, in fact, as we speak, protest actions ongoing. Would you like to address the supporters of the former president?
The supporters of the former president? Well, you know, again, the government is just doing...
Okay, let me say this for the 100th time. I do not recognize the jurisdiction of ICC in the Philippines. I consider it as a threat to our sovereignty. Therefore, the Philippine government will not lift a finger to help any investigation that the ICC conducts.
The same leader who once stood by Duterte Bongbong Marcos is now accused of turning his back on his former ally. Was this a calculated move to eliminate a political rival? Or a shift to save the country from international disgrace?
He gave the go signal to bury former President Ferdinand Marcos at the libingan ng mga bayani, hours after the Supreme Court allowed the hero's burial for the late dictator.
Well, I thought I saw Bongbong yesterday in Tacloban. Sabi ko, it's your choice. Sabi niya na, same question like you. Can we now proceed? Oh, yes, you can.
The president adds, quote, "I said before, I will not take my word back."
Bongbong Marcos could not have won without Sara Duterte. The Uniteam was formed a formidable coalition uniting the Marcos and Duterte clans, their message, unity above all. Sara Duterte was the heir to her father's strongman legacy, and her presence reassured Duterte's supporters that Marcos Jr. would continue his policies. After Marcos Jr. took office, tensions began to surface. Marcos distanced himself from Duterte's violent war on drugs. He focused on economic diplomacy, aligning more with the U.S. and Western allies instead of China. Corruption scandals within the appropriation and misuse of states' health insurance, PhilHealth, and the alleged budgetary insertions made by lawmakers haunted the government. In a dramatic shift of events, lawmakers conducted probe on Sara Duterte's alleged misuse of its confidential fund during her tenure as Education Secretary and in her office. Likewise, legislative probe was pursued by the Quad Committee of the House of Representatives against war on drugs by the former President Rodrigo Duterte. Did Marcos Jr. betray Duterte? Was this a calculated move to consolidate power?
Chanting Duterte's name and waving...
Duterte, daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, files a writ of habeas corpus petition with the Supreme Court seeking the return of her father, who was arrested at the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands for crimes against humanity.
Part said that they do not want to preempt the Supreme Court, but again defended the arrest and transfer of Duterte.
But normally po, usually po, kapag ka po yung tao ay nasa ibang bansa na po at nadala na po, nagiging moot and academic yung...
Duterte's arrest led to a political crisis. His supporters launched massive protests across the Philippines and overseas in The Hague, Hong Kong, and the U.S. In Manila, tens of thousands gathered in Libasang Bonifacio, the historic cradle of revolutions, demanding Duterte's release. The Philippines stands at a crossroads. Once promised unity, the nation now teeters on the edge of division, chaos, and uncertainty. What happens next? Will Duterte supporters escalate their protests into outright rebellion? Protests have already turned systematic and viral. How far will they go? Loyal military officers and local warlords once allied with Duterte, they now turn against the Marcos administration. Is martial law on the horizon? Will Marcos Jr. use emergency powers to silence dissent, just as his father did? How will the international community react if he does? Can democracy still survive, or is the country slipping back into authoritarian rule? The 2028 elections are just a few years away. Will a new force emerge, or will the Duterte-Marcos war define the future? A country once promised unity is now more divided than ever. As history threatens to repeat itself, one question remains. Will the Filipino people take control of their own destiny, or will they once again be at the mercy of those